Coming up in this week's episode of Netball Unlocked, we reflect on a frantic weekend of Super Cup action and ask, is it what the Netball Super League needed? We'll dive into a full-on season preview and a reason to cheer and maybe one to fear for all 8 teams. We've got our first official guest, very exciting, Manchester Thunder head coach and franchise director, and at the weekend miracle worker, Karen Greig. She's had quite a bit to juggle, and we'll get stuck into one or two questions as well. Thank you for getting involved. Hello and welcome along. Episode 2. Paul Prendeville here. Chloe Merrill alongside me, virtually at least. Chloe, we made it through week 1. Top line thoughts. We've landed. We've made the digital space.
Oh, I can't believe it. It's like all this time manifesting this project, and here it is. We let it loose out onto the world, and I've been blown away by all the reaction that we've had.
Yeah.
I want to actually just say a quick thank you to everybody that's followed, subscribed, liked, engaged with us already. We already had like a couple of 100 followers on Instagram before we even dropped our own podcast. So I think that is an endorsement, but also something that we also take really seriously. So pleased that you trust us and, get ready for it because we're going to keep delivering, I hope.
Yeah, look, I'd echo that. And I think from my point of view, what was quite heartening on that front is like we made episode 1, like kind of a bit off the cuff. It was a little bit, this is us, this is what we're about, this is what we want to do. And it was quite nice to see that well received. What I hope now is as we hear from players, which we'll do because you were up in Sheffield and we've got Karen Greig joining us as we debate big talking points in the league. I think that much emerged from Super Cup at the weekend that we're going to have a lot to talk about. My hope is that that sort of stuff as well, like generates that bit more debate, that bit more engagement, kind of reaches new fans, old fans who want to engage as well. So yeah, look, super encouraging, really, that kind of a bit of waffle from me and you for 40 minutes landed really nicely. So yeah, just to echo Chloe's thoughts, thank you, I think is what I would say. But we got to move on. We can't sit here dwelling on everything. We're here to deliver the news, aren't we? And we haven't really got too much time to rest because we've actually got an awful lot to get through in this second episode. We promised you last week a meaty preview, and before we even get to that, we've got the Super Cup to review. Chloe, you were there in the arena. I was at home. Top line for me, frantic.
Yeah.
It was, which I think was good, right? I kind of think that was good from a product point of view. We'll get into the netball side of it. What about you? Your top line thoughts on the concept, the day, how it worked? You know, netball's been trying to get this opening day right, I think, by its own admission for a long time.
Yeah, I think frantic is one word. I have been calling it a sugar rush. I think it was visually very compelling, a lot of action. I think it was the best netball has looked for a little while, which was really cool to see. I think the format was smart because all I kept thinking was, I wish this was longer. So if a preseason tournament leaves you in a place where you want more, then I think maybe that's exactly the job that it was supposed to do. Maybe luck might have had a bit more of a hand in it than I maybe would have liked, but it was edge of the seat action and the arena really embraced the super shot. However, for those that listened along to last week, I went on a little bit of a super shot rant, but one of the things I outlined as part of that was that I had a feeling that there were certain foundational pieces that I wish were in place before the league had embarked on something like a game-changing rule. And that was really borne out on Sunday when it was clear that we wouldn't be having live stats for the coverage. I was told by England Netball that they weren't going to be doing anything live and that the stats would be up for the season proper, but not for the day. But for me, Paul, on a professionalization piece, like basic statistical information just can't be missing. You go out of your way to introduce this brand new rule. You insist it's going to be innovative and exciting. And then at the moment it debuts and is being received positively, in the arena at least, you miss the chance to give it any substance or data. And that's what netball needs to be doing to at least move on par with everybody else. We both said this during and after, like, God, thank the Lord, you and I both weren't writing up this experience or a game or the whole tournament, because you would have needed a pen and paper and to have had your eyes glued open to have covered everything properly. And to me, that's just not good enough when you're trying to engage bigger audiences and court media attention. And I don't think it was just the stats as well. I think from the arena point of view, we were missing quite critical information about, folks loved the action, but they just wish there was more context. There was no player programs. There wasn't a sense of tables and consequences and ramifications, and which was a shame, I felt, because actually in Group 2 it did go down to the wire, and it'd been really nice to know what this game meant and what the result was going to do for the sport part of the sportainment piece, which was actually, funnily enough, one of the questions that we got asked right before we came on, what our thoughts were on it. It wasn't balanced in my point of view. It was more tainment than sport. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I kind of think we can come at this in two ways, because obviously I watched the broadcast, which was extremely polished, looked good. With you, my discrepancy was really when it came to the group stages. I thought right at the end of Group 2, it to me, and I'm a former statistician, so like I had kind of worked it out what needed to happen, but it didn't feel like everybody knew who needed to do what, and that was a bit of a shame, because actually Pulse, Lightning, and Dragons, depending on 3 different outcomes, could all have gone through. Like in my head, it was pretty simple in that regard. Obviously, came down to goal. Could have come down to goal difference and things like that if it had gone that far. So I'd say that I would kind of agree with you there. I think from a kind of bigger picture piece, like it would be good to know that. But we obviously during the broadcast were getting the tables, so we could kind of see it. If that information wasn't available in the arena, like I don't know, I've never been to Sheffield Arena actually, whether there's a capability to be able to kind of put the broadcast on a big screen, like as simple as that. Even if you don't use the sound, but you get the coverage. Like we're getting way too deep into that, but yeah, I would agree in that front. I have to say I was a little bit sceptical of like a kind of mini tournament to start the season, but actually it became quite apparent fairly early on that the sense of jeopardy that brought with it actually made for a much better crowd product. And I think building to a conclusion at the end of the day where you crowned a winner and a loser in the final, and all the coaches were quite adamant with you that there was this isn't really a kind of proper tournament. It's not even each game is not even a quarter. But I think actually for those who were there, sometimes at season opener, and Nia Jones, who was excellent on commentary as well, she pointed out, and she's played in enough of them, that actually come the end of the day, like people are starting to disappear out of the crowd and make their way home early, and your team might not be playing anymore, but actually that sense of anticipation and building up to a final, I thought made for a really good sporting product, like to sort of counter argument what you're saying. And then I suppose the final part of it was the super shot, and I have been on the fence on this, and I'm happy to stay on the fence. But I really enjoyed the sense of, and I can't remember who this might have been. Actually, one of the dads at our netball match on Sunday said this, but he was like he felt that scoring a goal at the top level is fairly expected, right? Like in theory, you should score, but actually, the further out you go, the less chance there is of scoring. And it made for perhaps something that a little bit more exciting to watch. Now, I think you and I are aficionados. We're like, actually, there's way more to it than that. You've got to work the ball down the court. You've got to turn the ball over. One of the first things I learned about it was that actually the defensive side of the game is probably the most important part, because that's where you turn ball over and win ball. So, look, I think from that point of view, I liked it, I have to say. I thought it worked. I would be very keen to see how it works over extended periods, and 15-minute quarters are obviously going to be a part of that. and I will be interested to see how it evolves tactically, because I thought the way different teams used it was interesting and good. I've always sort of said in football terms, not everyone has to be Manchester City, not everyone has to be Wimbledon from the 1980s. Like, different styles certainly make for a better viewing package, and I quite like the way Dragons, for example, were quite deliberate in sort of taking Georgia Rowe off and then sort of bringing on Chelsea Beard. Like, that was a very deliberate ploy. I think it was quite clear that certain shooters had preferred places that they wanted to take their shots from. So how will that evolve over like a game? Coaches are clever, and we're going to speak to them all over the course of the season. It won't take a coach long to work out, okay, we'll stop her getting the ball in that area of the court. So I think from a tactical point of view, it adds an element of intrigue. But again, it was short form, to use your own words. It was sugar rush. Like, how does that equate to a longer game? And obviously, come this weekend and going forward, we'll see that. But I have to say, I think I come down on the side that I quite enjoyed it. Sorry, Chloe.
No, you don't have to apologise. You're allowed to enjoy things. Of course. No, I think, just to elaborate a little bit more on your point about what, if anything, can we say that's substantive on a netball front? I don't know. I don't think there's too much. And like you pointed out, the coaches that I spoke to afterwards all were very keen to stress, this is not normal netball. We've never actually played this kind of netball before.
I think that's okay, though, right?
That's okay.
I think that's all right, yeah.
Sure, yeah. But I think we need to manage our expectations about what it is that we can learn a little bit. Yeah. So, as you said, 40 minutes is not even a quarter. I did the maths. I crunched some numbers, Paul.
Very good.
It's not something I normally do. And so the Super Shot was effectively active for 43% of those games, whereas in the regular season proper, it's going to be 33%.
That's significant. Yeah, that's a good point.
And therefore, the matches were engineered to highlight the Super Shot, which I think is important. I think also we can say with our chests that we have identified our super shooters, let's call them that. Mm-hmm. I think there were quietly more than we expected, given that recruitment sort of happened after the rule was introduced. I think most clubs will be happy with the way their shooters went to post. But for me, what was missing, and I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, is defense on the Super Shot. Some shooters, as you said, just landing in the same spot over and over again. They clearly found a little corner. Ella Clark certainly likes the corner. Yeah. With little disruption. I think Jiva Mentor sort of stood out as...
I agree. Yeah.
In the defence and, years of experience speaking there, not least from playing with the Super Shot. But that's a likely reason why Leeds excelled there. But I think tactically that's still to be ironed out. And actually, Super Cup winning coach Sam Bird said this to me. Here it is in her own words. Sam, the Super Shot, your players seem to embrace it. How much are you embracing it as a coach?
Yeah, well, I wasn't a fan, Chloe, but it does change the game though. Like we felt, I don't know how it felt watching all the games, but just wasn't enough ball being won, and a little bit respectful of the shooters and sort of sagging back. So we were like, let's have a go at those, let's really get into those shots. But we've got three shooters, obviously, that enjoy shooting long, and I'm hoping that will be really good for us in the long term.
And a hungry defence end.
Indeed, always hungry at Pulse for winning ball, but I felt we could have won more. That is our identity, so we want to win ball all over the court, but so nice that the shooters can reward those defenders for that hard work.
And I think that's really interesting, Paul, because it sort of means we're scratching the surface of this still. But tell me, is there any player that impressed you, or multiple players that impressed you?
Yeah, I was impressed by. I managed to watch quite a bit, and I was particularly impressed. You tipped me off on this, but Rolene Strojka from Forest. Obviously, the Super Shot is very eye-catching, but I enjoyed the way she kind of effortlessly controlled the circle at times as well. Like, I think it was very easy to get carried away by 2 pointers, but actually there was an awful lot more to her game than that. I'm, again, really looking forward to see how that evolves. If I stick with Forest, who are maybe, along with Leeds, a surprise package of the day, I really enjoyed seeing Iona Christian back in action. I thought her speed through the court was really eye-catching. I never failed to be impressed by Leah Middleton and Jackie Newton for Dragons. I will get to them a little bit later on. But, they do have quite a physical style of defence, and it's not always everyone's cup of tea. But I do think it gives Dragons an identity, and they were able to play to those strengths. And I suppose sticking with Dragons, I think Philippa Yarrington was a bit of a star.
Agree.
Like, she definitely found a couple of sweet spots in the circle and around the super shot. And it was interesting to hear the coach say afterwards that she's been working really, really hard on her shooting. And I think we want to hear that type of stuff. Like, I think, professionalisation and the journey to get there and all those sorts of things are going to require hard work from people. You mentioned Jiva. She's always a star, but she was outstanding. She seemed to revel in the opportunity to just sort of play for kind of all-out netball for 14 minutes and then just get a breather after it. She was fantastic. I think for Pulse, I think Sam said afterwards they grew into the tournament, and I think what was quite interesting from their point of view, I don't know if Hallie was carrying a bit of a knock. I saw her knee taped towards the end, but it did give Darcy Everett a chance to play, and I think she's going to emerge as a real star this year. She's a really talented defender. Fumi was just doing Fumi things. At this point, you just kind of expect that, right? And I think there's nothing kind of new from that point of view. And I also think you have to call out Thunder. I know they kind of got beat in the semi-final, and we'll get into it a little bit with Karen shortly. But given what they've been dealing with through the off-season, like a complete change around, it feels like every couple of weeks they've had an injury to deal with. And then to go out and bring in sort of... who I'll highlight will be Emma Rayner, Aliyah McCormick and Anya Williams, because I thought it's testament to what Thunder have built, and that's like a real strong structure. And those three players were kind of just able to step in effortlessly, pretty much start every game. I haven't got team sheets in front of me. We have got a very good document that I built for us.
If you do say so.
If I do say so myself, I do love a document. And all three of them were really, really strong. And I think it just gave a little window into what Thunder are likely to be about, because they're going to have to negotiate a few storms this year. We know their injuries. We know sort of obviously with Nat Metcalf being pregnant as well, that the squad is probably nowhere near as strong as they thought when they first named it. But that doesn't actually mean that they can't go out and win games. And I was super impressed by how they went out. I would also chuck Birmingham Panthers into the mix. That, like, if you look at their defeats, they lost by 2, 6, and 2, which is not an awful lot in a short form netball. And I felt there was enough from them to make me think, oh yeah, they'll be all right. I think that's everyone. If I mentioned everyone, I didn't mention Lightning. I thought Lightning were fine. Vic Burgess said afterwards, and I was reading through the quotes and listening to the interview you picked up with her. Like, they're transitioning a little bit. Shadeen, for me, was an outstanding defender in the Super League last year. She's going to be absolutely superb. She'll be a fine replacement for Nicola Smith. So, yeah, I kind of think that's probably it for me. I could probably reel off another 2 or 3 names, but
I'll just add one more. I'm going to add El Murray Vanderberg.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Just because I think we don't have the stats, and we still don't have the stats. But I reckon that she was pretty high shooting across the 1 goal and the 2 goal area. And she stood up in attack for Thunder, as you sort of gestured towards there with those injuries. Like, she's now the oldest person.
Pro,
she's the pro. So I thought she did a really, really good job there. But yeah, excellent. I think I think it's an appetizer. Leaves you. It's the bit before your main course. It doesn't fill you up, but it makes you want your main course. So maybe is that a fair summary, do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. And I kind of think that's probably what everybody would have wanted from it. Like, you and I can sit here as super nerds who are desperate to have all the information to hand. And we do kind of have to caveat all of this with, this is the start. But as you said, okay, why not start as you mean to go on as well with this?
It's a professional start, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's fine to sit here and say, do you know what? I think that was a really good start to the season. Like, it made me look forward to this weekend. I was already looking forward to sort of round 1 as it stands anyway, but it did make me think, actually, I want to know more about El Murray and Rolene and how Thunder are going to deal with their defensive issues and how Lightning are going to adapt to two pretty significant changes to a title winning team. You know, you take out Mary Chollock and you take out Nicola Smith, who were amazing last year, and you replace them with maybe quite different players in sort of Berry Neal and Shadeen van der Merwe. So you're coming away thinking, okay, let's have a little bit more of this. And I think if it's done that for you and I think it will certainly, hopefully, have done that for a lot of other people as well. And I think to put a bow on that first part, I think that has to be seen as a positive, in my opinion.
All right, let's crack on.
Let's crack on. As we said, this week's about getting into it. Now we sort of touched on this in various ways, but I do think it's worth, before we get into the teams, just going through the kind of rule changes, which super conveniently were announced literally the morning after we recorded our first podcast.
It was on purpose, wasn't it?
It's almost like it was on purpose. Like, everyone's out there thinking, what are Paul and Chloe doing? They're really not. So you're the super nerd, right? So I'm gonna go to you for bite-size information on each of these 4 points. So I will say them to you. You sum them up for me. You all right? You all right with that?
Yeah, let's go. Okay. Number one, super shot.
Number one, super shot. Go for it.
Well, we know this one quite well, but it allows for 2 goal shots from a dedicated area within the outer edge of the shooting circle in the last 5 minutes of each quarter. That's
simple. And we've had a taster of it now, don't we? So we don't need to.
43% of it, yeah.
43% of game time at the weekend. That was stats I wasn't expecting. Number two,
tactical timeouts.
Yes.
Yep. Each team is going to be allowed 90-second timeout once a game. This must be called by a player and after a goal is scored.
How do you see that playing out?
I see it mostly as a momentum killer.
It'll be interesting to start speaking to the coaches a little bit about that, because I'd spoken to a couple beforehand, and I didn't know that information, so I hadn't obviously put it to them as questions. So I will be interested to see how coaches view it. You and I obviously deal with a lot of American sport. Timeouts are a part of what they do, so I will be interested to see where the nuance comes in on that front, and maybe timing, like actually around, hypothetically call one in the middle of the super shot zone and stop someone getting into a bit of a rhythm or whatever it might be. I'll be interested to see how that sort of stuff plays out. Point number 3, no draws.
No draws. So if the score is level after 60 minutes, there is now extra time. Extra time will last 10 minutes with a short break in the middle. I couldn't get any information on how long that short break was. Okay. If the score is level, still we continue until someone has a 2-goal lead. So someone could kill the game with 1 super shot.
Okay, that'll be an interesting one to see how it plays out. And I suppose slightly tied to that. Go on, sorry.
So we did have draws last season.
We did.
So
yeah, we did.
They are rare, but they're not like extinct. We'll see them in the wild. So I think we had one on Super Cup Sunday.
We had one on the weekend.
Yeah. So that would be interesting for sure.
And point number 4, points in defeat, which is interesting. It's commonplace, I suppose, in youth netball, kind of getting within a certain number of points, depending on your league and how it's set up. Explain it to us.
Points in defeat. The new reward system is such that a win is 3 points, a loss of 5 goals or less is 1 point, and a loss of more than 5 goals is 0 points. So I think, Paul, this one is going to be big, because if people remember, or perhaps they don't know, we have a new finals structure for the league as well, where these 1 points are going to matter. So it gives teams something to play for, to compete for. So it's quite a nice tie-in with the super shot.
I like this one. I have to say, I like this one. I think it's a good thing. I think we'll probably get onto this maybe a little bit later on in the season, but the concept and the conversation around blowouts, I think, is a little bit unfair as we've said, we cover a lot of American sport, and blowouts certainly in the NBA and the WNBA are fairly commonplace, and they do play a million games a season. So sometimes it's about kind of load management and things like that. But I think in this instance, when we have got 14 games over the course of a regular season, if hypothetically, like, you are in every single one of those games, and you can almost generate a minimum of at least 1 point, right? Like that's the starting point. Then I do think that will significantly help the kind of competitive balance of the league. I think in the past we've been able to go into leagues thinking, right, well, we can tick off 2 or 3 of those places, maybe even 4 of those places in the top 4 of the league. I do think this brings with it an element of, actually, maybe that opens up position 3 and position 4 a little bit more, and it maybe keeps that battle for top 4 places going all the way through to the end of the season. And as much as we talk about we want competitive games, actually we also want a competitive league, right? We want lots of teams being in the mix, and every sport in nature will play its part in that. But I do think from a reward point of view, I think this is a good one. I like it.
Yeah, I have 2 things to add here, Paul. I completely agree. I think it's a must now. I think the one thing that is also important here is that clubs have to go to sponsors, and they want to show how successful they are. And maybe they didn't win a bunch of games, but they were damn close. And this is going to help them make that case. If it is as simple as, well, you finish at the bottom of the table, I'm not interested in giving you money. It's like, well, no, actually, like, maybe we did, but we were close. So I think that is a broader picture point that I think probably bears mentioning. And then this kind of ties into a question that we had as well, but this is also a lot for the umpires. So this is definitely all these rules, not least a super shot, but timeouts, draws, the length of games, and also, just the normal bit that umpires have to do. The question that we had, Paul, was if players are professional, what about umpires and officials? Where do you sit on that?
I think it's probably very fair. I think it's hard at the moment, just because I suppose if you compare the nature of, let's say, Premier League football, or even just top level football in this country, those players are maybe sometimes playing 3 games a week. Referees are refereeing 3 games a week. I think it would be difficult to sustain and I don't know enough about this, like a professional game board or whatever it might be, a bunch of sort of maybe 10 officials who rotate through the season. I then think you're limiting their chance of a career and a job elsewhere. And who knows, maybe in 10 years' time, this conversation might be a much easier one to have. I feel at the moment that's probably stage 2 of whatever the next part of Netball 2.0 is going to be. It's a difficult one to ask, actually. I have to answer, sorry, because I'm not sure we would be quite ready to sustain it in netball. I think that would be my overall verdict. Yourself?
Yeah, I think it should be up there as a priority for things that, again, to reference myself once more, the foundational pieces for me. This is one of them, because we're asking more of our game, we're asking more of our players, we're asking more of their fitness, their capabilities, and we have to empower the people that officiate that as much as possible. How can we expect contest when it can't be umpired properly, maybe because the provisions aren't there, or it's all about, it's leveling up everything, lift as you climb. And I think that's I'd love to see it be a priority for sure. And I think the officials are the ones that are going to have to be collecting statistical data, so let me throw money at them. No, I mean, joking aside,
it would be really difficult, right? Because you're effectively looking at let's say 4 games every weekend. You'd need a crew who would be allocated to a game. So that's, let's say, 4-5 umpires at any given time, who would then need a fully functioning wage that allowed them to be professional, to focus on their fitness, to focus on their development, to maybe work with teams, to maybe this is the answer, maybe going out into the communities and working a little bit closely at grassroots level and a regional level and things like that. So maybe there's some sort of answer in that as well, that it becomes more than just umpires on Super League Sunday, for example. Like you're doing more to it. But yeah, I definitely think if the sport wants to go in that direction, which is obviously part of the conversation and is always going to be part of the narrative, that having that sort of level of officiating is going to be important. You can't get away from that.
Yeah.
What's the Suncor setup on that? Do we know?
No, I don't know. That's a good question. Let's come back on that.
Let's
That'll be one of my. Yeah, I'll circle back to it. Research. Let's go find out. Talk to people because I think that's really important. I think it's an important part of this picture.
I kind of think. I think that's it from a kind of rules and regulations point of view. I was a little bit disappointed in trying to find the information because I saw it on social and I thought it landed pretty well. I was working and then I was out in the evening, and I think when I came home to try and find it on the Super League website, like the top story that day was one they pushed out later on in the day about umpires, which ironically enough we've just been discussing, and it was just a little bit like, oh, okay, I feel like I've got to try and find this story now, and that's modern world, right? I work in websites. Like, we're all lazy. We just want it in front of us to start with. I felt like that was a lot of information to take in one day. I thought messaging was delivered brilliantly on social, but then when you go and try to find it on the website and get the link to put in our running order, there's another, we've got documents, we've got running orders now. This is way more polished than we were at last week. I feel like that maybe is just something that could have just looked a little bit better, and that might be a little thing from me because I deal in website work every single day of the week. So
no, I don't think it's just you.
Thing.
I tried to click on the link that you gave me to the rules to brush up on them, to be ready to deliver them in the most glamorous manner, in which I did, and it leads me to a 404 page, and I can't find it on the website. So yeah.
Just good job you've taken us through all the rules then, Chloe.
Yes, I'm now the guide, the oracle.
Okay, cool. So that's the early headlines out of the way. On with the season preview, and that starts, I think, with our very first guest, Karen Greig from Manchester Thunder. Thanks for joining us, Karen, our very first guest on our new Netball Unlocked podcast. I'm sure you've got plenty going on, but Chloe and I just wanted to say thanks very much. It's been a busy week for you.
It certainly has. And thanks for having me. It's an honour to be your first guest. It's quite exciting, really, isn't it? New podcast. And I think reading between the lines of what you guys are about, definitely going to be an interesting one. So excited to be on.
Thanks. Well, listen, thanks for joining us. Chloe, go on. Anything from you?
Karen, I mean, where to begin? I think we'd love to know what the latest is, what the state of play is with injury. You've been absolutely decimated, effectively, like 40% of your squad out. Can you let us know how things are going for you right now?
Yeah, we've been pretty ravaged. It's been an off season, that's for sure. It's been a tough one, and they always say like you've got to love your job, right? And I do 95% of the time, but it's definitely been a tough run into the season. So we obviously found out about Nat's pregnancy back in September, October time. Obviously super excited for her when she announced her pregnancy and her first child. So can't wait to meet baby Metcalf. But that obviously left our first hole in the squad. And we kind of really looked at how do we go about replacing Nat? What does that look like? And I was pretty adamant that we would take our time in making those decisions because, ultimately Nat's a huge gap that you need to fill. So in some ways, us kind of holding back and waiting to replace Nat worked in our favour with everything that's gone on since. So, we're having to play our cards pretty well. And then obviously we lost Nicola when she was playing for South Africa in the first test against Jamaica in January. So she had a fracture through her radius, a wrist joint, and as well as a detached tendon in her thumb. So not a nice injury for Nick. And then obviously Lois pulled up in training with an injury there. So she's subsequently had surgery. She has a scan on Monday, which is her 8-week mark from her surgery, and we're hoping to know more about her return once she's had that midpoint scan as to if there's a chance that she will be back during the season or not. Obviously, we've all got fingers crossed for her that we will get her back at some point, but that halfway point on Monday is critical for us as to knowing where she's at. We're hoping to get Nicola back some kind of mid-April kind of time, so maybe around 4 or 5, fingers crossed. She's making some real progress. She's absolutely hating on me and Laura and Gabs in training because she's getting a lot of attention from us one-on-one. So, but she's going to be firing, ready to go once she's back on court. And then, unfortunately, last week we got the news that we needed to pull back on Paige Reed. She actually sustained a stress issue in her foot in the Nations Cup back when she was obviously representing England and got her first cap, which was super exciting for her. So yeah, we've just been kind of managing that over the last few weeks, but scan results showed that we just needed to pull back on her. So fully deloading Paige at this moment in time, and as it is a stress response, no real timeline on when she'll be back, but we're hoping it won't be too long.
Have you known anything like this? You've been in the game a long time, player and coach. It seems fairly unprecedented to me, certainly in netball terms.
I've never had to deal with it as such. We have had difficult seasons. You know, we look back at 2022 and people will probably ignore 2022 because we went on unbeaten and won the league. So they probably go, well, you didn't have that many problems. But our defence end for pretty much most of that season was decimated, and we actually had to turn a goal shooter into a goal defence in that season to kind of get through it. So we've definitely faced challenges before, and you know we've got a great culture at Manchester Thunder that everyone rallies behind and makes sure we kind of do what we need to do to get through the season. But I think it's even more difficult now. We're playing off 10 players. I don't think you can ignore that fact that we don't have training partners and we've got a flat 10. So even training with 10 players is tough because your players are not getting any rest. You know, like if you're doing half court, whereas previously you had a squad of 15 in at training, if you were doing half court, a couple of people would always get that rest and you could always afford to load manage people through training and stuff like that. Whereas now you're playing off 10. No one's getting a rest. Like you're in training, you're in every combo, you're in everything that you're doing. So it becomes more high risk to those athletes that any niggles and stuff like that become harder to manage. And if we do pull back, then that upsets our training. So it's a, first year in NSL2 going down to 10. And I think we're definitely finding we're getting every challenge thrown at us, which is character building, some might say.
I was going to say, Karen, because you pointed to the 10, which was part of this professionalisation process, and then the second half of that really is this pulling up from next gen. But there's an enormous sense, like 4 international players. There's not that quality in next gen as much as everyone would wish that there was. How, what do you make of those rules? Because I imagine no one probably thought that this would ever happen. And now you're providing the greatest stress test of the rules ever.
Well, I know NSL2 are constantly saying, we're monitoring all situations and we'll assess it at the end of the season. I'm like, well, we're throwing every possibility at you. So assess that and go with it however you please. So, it's definitely a difficult one. And I think you strike on the next gen and is the quality there yet? I don't think it is. That next gen league is going to be brilliant and definitely critical in the way we move our sport forward, absolutely. But as you mentioned, like we've lost 4 international athletes, Lois and Nat and Paige all rose as internationals, and Nicola Aspar Protea. No one can replace that quality from within the next gen. It's just impossible. So for me, we talk about our league wanting to be the best league in the world and wanting to be challenging SSN, but whilst the restrictions around the regulations are as they are, we're never going to get there, unfortunately, and that kills me to say, because I love our sport. I love Manchester Thunder. I love our league, but I find that the regs are a little bit strangling, and don't get me wrong, England Netball have been working, and SL2 have been working really nicely with us to try and look where we can get some special dispensation. You only need to look at the fact we were able to bring an A Retief in, and we really appreciate, that flex and support, but I do think the regs are a little bit strangling. If we want our league to be the best in the world, then there's going to have to be another look at what those regulations are, and whether, I know they don't want to go all out into allowing as many internationals as possible because they're concerned around the impact that will have on the Roses, which I fully appreciate. But in my eyes, I'm like, surely 3 imports wouldn't be too many if you had 1 in each area of the court, so you're still getting that development around them. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. The next gen, we had to make decisions on our injury replacements before the next gen season had even started. So you hadn't even been able to get eyes on those players and see what those players were capable of doing. So for us to make decisions on who were we pulling up and when, we were holding off on that till next gen started so we could get eyes on people. And then obviously you lose Nicola and Lois. It's like, I don't even know if my defenders are ready to step up and replace a Nicola Smith. You just can't make that decision at that point. So, yeah, it's a tough one, and there's still, I do think the quality is lacking. There's probably a couple of players dotted around next gen that could step up into Super League and be ready, but there's also a lot of players, especially not 4 in one club, that can do that.
And 3 at one end of the court. Sorry, 3 at one end of the court as well is kind of a big thing as well, Karen. It's like you're not just dealing with someone everywhere. You're dealing with like a fairly significant drop off in one end of the court. So I think, to play devil's advocate a little bit, how would you like to see a squad look, if that makes sense? We're right at the dawn of this new era, if you like, and I think 10 always felt like it would kind of be a bit of a pinch point. Where do you see squads maybe in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line? What would you like to see them look like?
I mean, for me, I would like more imports. I think if we can go 1 in each area of the court, that would be great. And I think it would definitely add some, a sense of spice to the league and different styles of what that could be, what could offer, and definitely give Rose's players an opportunity to play against different styles week in, week out. We're seeing how well that works, in the SSN, the Australian shooters and other shooters are getting to play against some of the best defenders in the league week in, week out that they wouldn't be allowed to do, if their regulations were so tight. But I think the piece around training partners is critical, and being able to have players in your training environment to just bolster numbers and to have some quality in and around that. You look at how SSN are operating, and I'm not saying we need to go and copy SSN, but it seems to be that a lot of what we are doing is copying SSN. So if we're looking that closely to them, then why not have a look at what else are they doing? They've clearly faced some real issues with 10 players over the last few years. A lot of teams have been massively struck. They've now introduced that 11th player rule, so they can name that 11th player and bring them in whether there's injury or not. They might just choose to use them instead of somebody else, depending on what's happening, load management, etc. But they also have, I'm not sure what the exact number is, training partners that sit alongside them. So for me, I think, I appreciate going down to 10 enables us to pay our athletes more, to set us off on this journey of professionalisation, which is exciting in itself. Of course we want to be professional, but it can't be too much too soon at the detriment of our sport, that we're now got a club that, we are one of the top clubs in the country decimated, which ultimately we are. So
yeah, I wanted to also just make clear to listeners as well, Next Gen don't play the super shot rule, do they?
No, Next Gen don't play the super shot rule, no, and they don't have the timeouts in there either.
Which is quite, I think, quietly quite remarkable if you are trying to replace a shooter and then you're throwing them into this super shot environment, and we've seen already on Saturday the sugar rush that was for everybody, like to potentially, given that this is supposed to be an under 23 league as well, these are mostly young players coming into that super shot. So I think that's important.
And you know what, the super shot isn't just about the shot, right? Like,
sure.
You know, when it got announced and everyone's like, oh, the super shot, and you know, it's Marmite, isn't it? Some people love it, some people hate it, but then you look at it and go, it's not. People go to me, well, you're all right, Greggy, you know, you've got El Murray can shoot big, Anya can shoot big, Paige can shoot big, Lois can shoot big. Yeah, that's great. That's fine that my shooters can shoot big, but it's not just about being able to shoot big. Have you got the mental capacity to be able to recognise where you are in a game, to know when to take the twos, when to take the ones, how to actually get into those positions? Because it's not just about, like, you know, you look at you know, we've done loads of PA on the super shot in Australia. How are those players most efficient at getting into those areas to be able to split a defence or shift a defence, or, you know, get in your hot spots? What does it look like? Defenders, how are your defenders defending it? You know, like, what are your tactics? It's not just, oh, the shooters can shoot, it's great. How are your defenders defending it? What are your tactics around where you're trying to force the shooters? Your angles are completely different. So you're training your defenders up to be something that completely opposite to what we've tried to do for the 10 minutes prior in that quarter. So it's not just about the super shot and the shot and have you got shooters to do it. There's a whole big picture around it that the next gen athletes are not getting. And then they might have to come, you know, we're in a situation now where we've got El Murray as one shooter and we're pulling next gen shooters into our group. I've never done next gen, you know, I've never done, super shot before. So I'm now starting afresh with my next gen shooters, trying to get them to be where I need them to be, and we're still learning. You know, we're still in that position where we're still learning because I've only had them in training properly for 3 weeks. So it's a little bit chaos.
It does feel that, you know, a league that is supposed to kind of contribute to the senior league, if you like, should be playing the same kind of rules, right? I think it's a little bit like in the FA Cup where 7 stadiums can use VAR but 1 doesn't. It kind of distorts the competition a little bit. So it's a challenge. Where do you stand on the super shot, just as a innovation in general, Karen? You've spoken a little bit about where it goes tactically, which I think we already kind of got a little look at. Teams are going to play it differently, but as a concept and as something that's been brought into the league, what are your thoughts?
I'm not 100% against it. When it first got brought into SSN, I was like, oh God, don't like this. This is awful. But I think because it was brought in again so late to their league, the first 2-3 years was absolute chaos. Well, people are figuring out how to actually play it and how to use it. And I think it's probably been the last couple of years in SSN that's actually made some games really, really exciting and good to watch. So I'm not against it, and I do think if we can get it right, then it could be a real good tick for our game. Absolutely. My biggest thing around it was, and I've openly spoken about it, was tender process. There was no talk about changing our game and what those innovations were going to be. So you're tendering for a team, not even really knowing what the league was going to look like. You're recruiting players, not really knowing what the league was, that this rule was going to be played. And people, I know there's been conversations around, well, would you have signed different shooters had you have known this beforehand? I might not have done. I probably wouldn't have done. But my argument around it is I've now got shooters that I didn't get in until the 17th week commencing the 17th of February. And I've got 3 weeks to work with them on this new innovation to get right for the start of the season, which is no time at all when you're trying to build connections of normal netball, never mind super shot netball. So I'm not against it. I think it could really work for our league and definitely make it exciting. I think we got a snapshot of what it could look like at the weekend, although I do think it was a little bit chaos. I know I said to my shooters, just because it's a 2-point shot doesn't mean every shot has to be a 2-point shot. We can be a little bit smart with this. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how teams embrace it and what tactics they play around it. But I do think it can be good for our league, so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
I remember you said to me on Saturday, Karen, you weren't a big fan of the lights that were flicking.
Oh my God, the lights! I was like, if that was me, I would be literally. The lights went down. There were spotlights everywhere, and it was like, if I'm setting up to shoot at that point, wow, that is like sensory overload, right? You're trying to shoot a big shot with lights flashing and spotlights. Like, yeah, that wasn't it for me. Shout super shot over the mic and do whatever you want to do with music, but the lights, that's not great.
It even felt like I was watching from home. It felt like the stadium was plunged into darkness at times, and it was like, it was like not kind. Get it from a try it point of view, but I'd kind of be surprised if that sort of stuff carries on. It just didn't.
We won't be doing it at Thunder, Paul. I've said to our match day team, we are keeping the lights on.
There's a first unlocked exclusive, Chloe.
There you go.
No lights in Thunder.
Yeah.
Karen, can I ask more generally about the tender process and the professionalisation from your experience? Because you also came out quite publicly with the fact somebody was like, "Oh, was a super shot around recruitment?" and you came out and said no, which was a piece of information people were desperate to know. So you really lifted the lid on that for us. But where did that come from? Was that a place of frustration?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, obviously at Thunder, I sit with my feet in two camps at Thunder. So I'm a director on the board. I'm the franchise director and head coach in my day job. So I'm very much involved in the running of the club from day to day, and was very much involved in the tender process. And to be honest, last year was pretty horrendous. Like, it was so hard to kind of be part of a bid that there was still aspects of that bid that nobody was really clear of what you were actually bidding for. There was things happening at different times that we had to be adaptable to along the way. Obviously, everyone's super excited to be part of that journey in that tender process and want to be part of NSL2, but it was a long and arduous task that for me came alongside trying to be a head coach at the same time, which made it really difficult. And then obviously the uncertainty around, are we going to have a team, which we had to wait and find out quite a few months for. So that uncertainty of, am I going to have a job in 3-4 months' time? It's as difficult as for anyone, really. So, it was a long process. Every aspect of the business was scrutinised, from finances to community to your governance to, your performance department. And we had to make sure that we put the best possible bid together. And it was tough. There was some hard conversations at times. There was emotional conversations at times. And, if somebody asked me if I wanted to go through a tender process again, absolutely not. I'm out. I'll go on holiday at that point. Thanks.
You're head coach, Karen, not franchise director.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like pick your team, innit? I'm like, oh God. Yeah.
And one piece of this puzzle as well is the arena aspect. And I was wondering if you could maybe give us a bit of an insight into how that's sort of going for Thunder. You've always been one of the games that sells out. You have a great community at the Bellevue. I was looking at your schedule. You're also everyone's arena game, which I think is a nod to the kind of netball you put out and the challenge that you offer, but also that the fans you're going to bring as well. But how are things selling, given, where Saturday also was at in terms of nearly a full arena and lights and all of that jazz? What can the expectations be for the season ahead?
I think having 2 arena games in a year is always going to be a challenge for any team. We've been lucky enough to have an arena game for the last few years, and I think we've been averaging around 4-3, 4-5, for those ticket sales, which is pretty damn great. And I know targets around operating standards and KPIs are around hitting that kind of 3,500 to 5,000 seat. At this point, ticket sales have been slow, but I think notoriously netball fans are slow at buying tickets. Like, we have seen an uplift in the last week, we definitely have, and I think we're around just under 4,000 at the moment. ahead of Sunday. So we are going to be doing a big push over the next few days to try and obviously get more people through the door. But arena games are expensive. Like, just to open the doors, you know, you're talking, and I mean, I don't even really see the final figures, but just to open doors, you're talking around 60 grand just to open the doors. And then you've got to lay your courts, have your lightings, you know, all your match day experience stuff, pay your staff, you know. So it's you 100 grand minimum for an arena game that you've got to sell tickets to make back. And I think that's a really, really tough ask for teams. And for me, looking at this year, teams having 2 arena games this year with the idea of going to 3 arena games next year, I think going to 3 potentially is a step too far. I think we need to be selling out our home venues week in, week out, and creating the demand for people, because netballers are, and I can only speak for the Northwest, right, and Thunder fans, but notoriously buy tickets late. And we're very, very lucky that we've got a franchise, that we've got a great venue in Bellevue. You know, we average around 1,700 people into our venue, but we're not selling out every game. And it has to become a point where we're selling out every game and there is a demand for tickets. So they see those arena games as, we know we're going to get tickets at the arena, so let's get the tickets. We need to get Bellevue, and the fans are buying early. So when we release the tickets in October, we can already say we've sold out, but we're not at that point yet. So we have to really look at, well, what is the overall plan, and are we willing to pivot, pause, whatever that looks like, to generate that need and demand for tickets, and appreciate where we're at and the cost that falls on the clubs in hosting these kind of games. Are arena games brilliant? Absolutely. Like, they are the best experience. The players love them, I love them, the crowds love them. And of course we want every game to be in an arena and be a show. But we've got to create that demand, and I don't think we've created that demand yet. So, you know, we've got to get to a point where, how do we get more bums on seats and sell these tickets? And is the arena picture the right way to go? I'm not sure it's the right way to go on every single game. I know that's where NSL2 want to get to, but I know we did a fan survey at the end of last year. We actually got a really good response. I think we got something like 850 people respond to a survey, which in itself is a big response. Yeah. And a lot of our fans, they don't want arena games. They love the intimacy of Bellevue and the match day experience that Bellevue brings. So I think we've got to almost listen to what the fans want as well, and give them what they want. And I'm not saying don't play any games in arenas, because as I've just said, like, they're brilliant. I love them. They're great. They're the best day out. But we've just got to be maybe prepared to pause and pivot where we can definitely look to improve our sport. But it's definitely a great vision from NSL2. We just have to make sure we get it right.
Okay, here we go then. Actual season preview time. Like, we've done a lot of talking, Chloe, but now we're actually going to talk about the 8 teams who are going to kind of take us through this season and create rivalries, give us storylines, hopefully some needle. I think we all love a bit of needle. Let's get some of that involved in netball. Don't want to be too nice all the time. Lots to look forward to. That's my intro to our season preview stuff. And for those not aware, it's because round 1 this weekend, 4 games, very manageable. No one missing out, like one team having to sit out, which we've kind of had previous years. Like, this is 8 teams, 4 matches, lots to look forward to. I'll be at London Pulse versus Nottingham Forest, which should be good. Chloe, you are covering curling this weekend?
I am. I'm on the weekend shift, so
okay.
I'll be surveying broadcast. Yes, an Olympic qualifier. Yep, indeed.
The other games are Cardiff Dragons versus London Mavericks and Leeds Rhinos against Birmingham Panthers. They're both at 7 o'clock on Friday. And then huge on Sunday, alongside that Pulse Forest game, Manchester Thunder versus Loughborough Lightning always a brilliant watch. So I will be very much, will probably watch that as soon as I get home, I have to say. Nothing better to do with my Sunday nights now that the NFL's not on. But there's lots of different ways we could do this. Like, we could just sit here and waffle and waffle and waffle. But I think I had an idea that Chloe's on board with, I think, and that is to take 4 teams each, limit ourselves loosely to around 3 minutes, little chat through the team, one reason that they could be really excited and lots to look forward to this year, one reason that might not necessarily give them cause for concern, but something we're going to look out for and something they might need to change or adapt, or something that's kind of just maybe a little bit of uncertainty going into the season. I think whenever you go into a new season, you want to know, you kind of want to look forward to a lot of stuff, but I think there are enough questions for enough of these teams for us to kind of put that out there at the start. You're all right with that, Chloe? Rules work for you?
I follow your lead, Paul.
Okay, cool. You can start then, in that case. We'll go in alphabetical order, so no favouritism here. Randomly allocated as well, I will say. Over to you, Chloe, for the Birmingham Panthers.
Yes, Birmingham Panthers, a new franchise, but a lot of familiarity with many of the now defunct Seven Stars team making up this franchise, including head coach Joe Tripp. Additions are super shooter Gabby Sinclair, who comes from the Melbourne Mavericks in SSN, defender Gabby Coffey, who also comes from SSN, Melbourne Vixens, I believe, Michelle McGee and Aaliyah Zaranika. They come into the defence end, where Ella Powell-Davies stepped back from NSL and Neve Cooper sort of moved to Forest. Those were your previous defenders from Seven Stars. There is also a new addition on the bench with the appointment of former Jamaican head coach Connie Francis coming in as director of netball. So front office looking a bit different. One exciting thing I think has to be that Australian flavour. Coffey and Sinclair are big pickups. They're big pickups for Panthers. And while we didn't get to see them at Super Cup, I think that SSN experience with the Super Shot is just going to be a big advantage. And a bolt on to what we know these players at Birmingham can produce over sort of 10 minutes. We know that they have a set attacking way with Jess Shaw and Ziggy Berger, and we know that they've got Joe Tripp as a coach, but also a big defending genius, I guess. She is very keen on that. So with Jazz Brown at the back, Cabby Coffey in front of her, I think that can look pretty menacing. One thing I think, if I'm going to pick at it, to needle it, as you said, is going to be that predictability, I suppose, with that attacking front end. What's plan B? What's plan C? Can we see it? How successful is it going to be? Because we know Jess Shaw did really well feeding Ziggy Berger ball. Berger has a chance to finally take Chollock's crown as the league's top scorer. But I think everyone knows that that's what works there. So what can Panthers do with their 10, given we're now on 10, to stay ahead, to keep fresh? And that's nice. Birmingham Panthers.
That's very good. That has come in at just under 3 minutes, if I've done my maths correctly. I'm very keen on the growth of Jazz Brown, I think, this year. I think goalkeeper has been an area for England that they, I think, have experimented probably too much with. I think you and I kind of have differing thoughts on who might be the current incumbent, but I think we both agree that Jazz could actually be the person who takes England forward at goalkeeper. So I'm super keen to see how she kind of takes to this kind of more responsibility effectively. We've mentioned squads of 10. And I think, as I mentioned in the first show, when I spoke to the girls at Pulse, there was that kind of renewed sense of responsibility that came with being in a 10 rather than a slightly more expanded squad. So more responsibilities. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, good job.
Over to you.
Over to me. Cardiff Dragons. I mentioned this a little bit at the top. I think continuity is probably pretty good as far as Cardiff are concerned, and I think that's particularly evident at the defensive end. I think Leah Middleton, Jackie Newton is kind of almost as good a 1-2 punch as the league can kind of see in defence. I think how they adapt beyond that is going to be their kind of question, if you like. So that's their kind of cheer and their fear, if you like, out of the way in 30 seconds. I think that defensive foundation that they've got is so strong, and it limited strong attacking teams at times last year, looking back through sort of the fixtures. And I think the Dragons might find themselves one of those teams who maybe benefit from that new rule change of kind of closer games, because I do think they can run teams close. The growth, I think, is going to be important. And to that extent, I was pretty impressed with Kanyisa Chawani at the weekend as well. I thought she really knitted the play together well from centre. So the reason to fear, I think, is, you know, how do they progress as an attacking unit? Philippa Yarrington, who we mentioned, looked to have taken a huge step forward over the weekend at Super Cup. Again, can that translate to sort of, you know, long form netball matches? You know, Georgia Rose kind of proven as a sort of shooter, but adding depth to that sort of attack end is going to be interesting. We didn't really see Elle McDonald at the weekend. She's back for another year. I've always been a fan of Betha Kuya-Dale, who's been quite unfortunate with injuries. So she gets, you know, she's in the 10, and seeing how she'll evolve in terms of being that sort of middle of the court fulcrum, whether it's her and Chawani who sort of share centre duties. I'll be interested to see how kind of that shakes out, because Alex Johnson was good at wing defence at the weekend, a kind of quietly understated presence. Must be a wing defence thing. I think wing defence is sort of a quietly underrated position.
I'm sorry, I heard you say wing defence I just heard quiet, and I just thought, no, wing defence is the gobby, awful one.
No, I think it's quietly underrated.
Then you finish your sentence, and I was like, okay, I don't have to correct that. No, I think, they are always the worker. That's what the W stands for, right?
Yeah, that's very fair. And obviously, again, we spoke on the first episode about the kind of coaching nuances that we're going to see this year. And Rhea Dixon coming in, I think, is going to be really interesting. I think she showed her hand a little bit at the weekend with some kind of tactical nous as far as the super shot was concerned. And I'm keen to see how that develops. I think they're intriguing, Dragons, because they obviously are the only non-English team, if you like. And I do think as we go forward, having a Scottish team, maybe even Northern Irish team, is something that maybe needs to be considered. So I do think the Dragons' existence is important in the first instance, and hopefully their growth as a team, because I liked quite a bit of what I saw last year, and can they build on it? That would be my question.
Yep. I think another note for Curly, I think they call her, Rhea Dixon. That's the nickname. She was the assistant coach for Wales at the World Cup, so she's very familiar with a lot of that outfit. And she gave a really nice interview with us at Super Cup, and she sort of was pleased when she heard that Middleton was doing well, because their defensive structures is certainly something they've been working on. So and she gave us that little nugget about Phil. So yeah, I think that identity is going to be really important. A Kiwi coaches tend to do well in Super League as well. So looking forward to seeing how the Dragons, as you say, evolve.
Two teams down, two Kiwi coaches discussed already. So let's bring it home. London Mavericks, and obviously Camilla Buchanan in charge. A new look. Over to you, Chloe. They're your team. You drew them.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? Look, the London Mavericks, a team that has undergone a significant rebrand and also a decent amount of change in their playing group as well. So new for 2025, Australians Emily Andrew and Chelsea Blackman from SSN. We have Susie Liversiege from Seven Stars, who's notably made a little shift in her playing position as well, opting more for the mid-court rather than a shooting position. Amelia Hall from Rhinos, and Izzy Phillips from London Pulse. And of course, again in the offices, Tamsin Greenway comes in as director of netball. Look, Mavericks, loads of potential here. I feel like I say that about Mavericks every year, though. I love the signing of Izzy Phillips. I think she did an amazing job at Pulse last season, out of position at centre. She's a hungry defender and comes into a really cool defending backline with Razia Kwashi and Victoria Sola, who are both sort of Mavericks products. As with Panthers, I think that Australian experience is going to be healthy for this team, especially with the new rules. Hall and Liversiege to me are both really exciting players. They're very dynamic. I love Susie Liversiege's footwork. It's just always spot on to me. But I think the question, other than, this general sort of cloud that hangs over Mavericks as to why it never works, to be brutal, is how that front end stitches together. Because Rothwell and Thacker, while great, and we know that Thacker is a great super shooter, they are guilty of going missing. So certainly in the past, at least. So the question for me is not only how that circle moves, but how it's fed and how it's rotated, because we know also Emily Andrew can shoot super shots as well. So there's a lot going on there. It can be quite busy. I think coaching decisions are going to be really interesting there. So that's the London Mavericks for me. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I've lost count of the number of times that I've thought this is going to be the year that Mavs kind of push on again. So it's really only the last 4 or 5 years that they kind of have not really been in the mix. I think one season over the last couple of years came pretty close. On the face of it, I think it looks as strong a squad as there is out there at the moment. What I think might be interesting is how their next gen team supplements it. There is the small matter of George Fisher lurking, and it would be great to see George get back onto a Super League court, but we know she's had some really horrendous luck with injuries. But I do think whether they can kind of turn that kind of promise into a sustained challenge is just a very serious question, because like we've said, sort of Raz Kwasi, Vicky Oyasola, Izzy Phillips, Ellie Ratu, kind of Kira Rothwell, Emma Thacker, you've got people who've been in and around international setups. You've got 2 SSN guys coming over who can really add to that squad. You'd argue that maybe there aren't too many excuses for a Mav squad that looks on paper to be really, really strong, and whether they can deal with that, I suppose, pressure that comes with that a little bit will be super interesting.
Right, I'm going to swing it back to you.
London me Pulse. Now, yeah, of course. Yeah, Pulse. No changes. Sam Bird still CEO and head coach. 7 players returning, which I think is a good thing for most teams. And I think tied into that is sort of, we spoke a little bit at the top of the show about the Thunder way and that being so important. I think Pulse and Lightning alongside Thunder are the 2 teams that have that identity, and I think that's a reason to really cheer. And for Pulse, it's defensively. I think they're so strong defensively with Hanima Adio, Fumi Fadoju. I think Darcy Everett, as I've mentioned, is going to be a real third cog in that kind of like environment there. She's gonna come on for an 18-year-old. I think she's hugely talented. Zara Everett, again, is one of the more underrated wing defenders in the league, and she brings with it a real captaincy presence. I think she controls that team. She delivers the messaging for them. Coming off the bench will be interesting, because one of their new arrivals is Gracie Smith, who, if you speak to anybody, will tell you is one of the country's premier young talents, who's got huge ability to turn over ball. But she is very, very young. So seeing how she might adapt in that circumstance is something that I'll be interested to see. Pulse have got previous, obviously, with Izzy Phillips sort of coming a little bit out of left field last year and doing a tremendous job and sort of bursting onto the scene. I think the question for Pulse will be how they, maybe a little bit like Dragons, as I mentioned previously, how they develop as an attacking force. And I think the key to that is going to be their own Aussie import, Tyler Orr, who I've spoken to a couple of times. So I do a little bit of volunteering work with Pulse. She's a very impressive character. She, I think, will bring a calmness to the centre of the court. And I think the ability to move the ball quickly through the court is something that I know Pulse are keen to work on this year. I think we know they're strong defensively, but by their own admission at times, the volume of shots is not what they would like, especially when you've got someone as strong as Liv Sheen, who can shoot from pretty much anywhere, as we saw at the weekend. So I think Tyler Raw is going to be key, but Sheen developing a relationship with probably Nicole Breet, I would imagine, who's back and more than likely going to play more goal attack than sort of being moved around a little bit as she was last year. The first choice off the bench in that regard is Sophie Kelly, who's a really interesting addition. But I think if you get what you want out of Tyler Raw, along with like a super dynamic Alicia Scholes, and then Breet and Sheen are allowed to develop a long-standing relationship, then I feel you may have the start of an attack end to go with the defence end. So again, it feels like we're saying this quite a bit, but I do think Pulse's strength is their identity and that ability to win ball and turn over ball. It's then what you can do with that I would just have one or two questions about. I think there are answers there, but I think will they be able to find them? Because it is a shorter season as well, right? It's only 14 games now, so it's not like you've got bags and bags of time to stumble into different things.
Yeah, no, I agree with much of your analysis there, Paul. I think Zara Everett is I champion her. Yeah. I think she does a lot of work setting up someone like Fumi as well, as is Pulse's intentions. But she makes the people around her shine, which I think is always a great quality of a netball player. And like you, I think my reservations for Pulse will be in that attacking space and making sure that Liv gets the balls that she needs to slot away. But we'll see how they go. They are. Sam Bird has been absolutely playing. It's title time. Pulse still haven't got one, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
I do wonder as well. This is a slight timeout. Let's go timeout here because we're halfway. I do wonder what the weekend might do for a team who maybe aren't as familiar as a Lightning or a Thunder in terms of winning things. I think in any sport, winning is crucial, right? Like getting over the line, whether it's a pre-season tournament, whatever we deem Super Cup to have been. I do think that will be interesting to see what it does for mentality at Pulse. I'll be interested to see that because, we all love to win, don't we? Or those of us that are no good at winning, write about it. That's what I do. Onward though to the defending champions and Loughborough Lightning.
Loughborough Lightning, right. How to talk about this historic team? Well, the team on a historic quest, which is a three-peat. But they have quite a changed squad from previous years, which I think is very interesting and something I'm going to talk about in the positive section. But gone is the talismanic Mary Chollock, who was the focal point of their attack end for such a long time. Down the other end, Nicola Smith is gone to other 2024 semi-finalists Thunder. In comes Samantha Wallace-Joseph, Berry Neal, Shadeen van der Merwe, and Jodie Gibson. So we actually, Paul, had a question about Wallace-Joseph coming to Lightning. Yes. So let's address that. She's a tall shooter and can hold so strategically. No, a tall shooter that can hold, but also moves. We've seen that in SSN. So strategically, I can see the vision from Lightning in recruiting her. But she comes in off the back of a set of controversial circumstances. So for context for listeners, Wallace-Joseph went over to SSN from the NSL in 2017. She won 2 titles with the New South Wales Swifts. That's the club of Helen Housby. She suffered a really serious knee injury in round 1 of 2022. She was out for 2 years, supported by the Swifts in that period. She was set to make a comeback in 2024 and did, but it was very much marred by some anti-trans comments from Wallace-Joseph. There was widespread criticism of them. Netball Australia launched an investigation into it. She met with the club and league officials. There was an apology issued. But then, not rolling into the season, after round 7, Wallace-Joseph was notably dropped from the match day 10. And then a couple of weeks after that, a statement came out from the Swifts saying that they had mutually parted ways with her. They said, and I quote, in relation to a matter that concerned her behaviour within the team environment. In that time, also, Wallace Joseph's knee looked a little ginger still, and we have yet to see her play for Lightning. She missed some preseason games and a Super Cup. So that's what we know about her. What do you think, Paul?
Look, I think it's going to be interesting to see how she fits into a team dynamic. I think Vic Burgess is a brilliant coach and someone who creates a really strong environment for her team to thrive. I don't think she'd have brought in Sammy if they didn't think that they were able to keep that environment in place. So I think, we'll see how it shakes out. It's obviously not a very nice topic to have kind of cropped up and maybe followed Sammy around, but it's something that's happened. It's something that's been dealt with. We'll see how it goes. And that again is sort of not really answering the question, but I do think until we maybe get to ask a few questions ourselves and until we maybe get to sort of see how that dynamic works, we kind of will have to just sort of say, like, as you've just eloquently done there, this is kind of what's happened. I don't know if you've got anything, if you feel particularly strongly on it at the moment. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about what's gone on beyond what's been reported to form like a cohesive sort of, well, this is what should happen or that's what should happen. I think that's a touch unfair.
Yeah, and I think this is all that we know. Even as the SSN now moves into its sort of preview period ahead of the season start, they're not elaborating anymore on the statement. Obviously, it was unprecedented for a player to leave midway through a season, and then that's all we know. So anyway, back to Lightning. Pardon?
To Lightning themselves.
To Lightning themselves, indeed. Like I said, I think it's always good when a championship side mixes things up. And I think undoubtedly we've seen it. Clark's super shot ability is there with Neil and a healthy Wallace Joseph. That stands to be a very strong circle. The mid-court engine is the one that we've known for a really long time. And Fantomerva and Gibson offer a lot of experience in defence to step in to support Harvey after the departure of Smith. I think for me, the question that I'd love to see, and I'm sure it's the question Vic Burgess has been working really hard at, but when your identity, to borrow the word that you've been using, for such a long time has been a target shooter, and to remind everybody, before Cholak, there was Praskovia Peace. So really going back for quite a while, when your midcourt has been feeding that and looking for that and under pressure, always having that release, what is it going to look like when that's no longer necessarily there? So I think it's there's almost they've set themselves up for a challenge. Like, can we win and can we change? And I think that would be a great statement if Lightning can do that and they get the three-peat. I think what a nod that would be to Burgess as a coach. But I think it's going to be maybe an opening for other teams to just be like, right, okay, here's how it feels. And really, needle them, as you said, to challenge that and see if they can adapt.
I think it's a really brave decision, but I also think it speaks to a really strong coach, and I am a big fan of Vic Burgess. I think she's confident in her ability to get the best out of that team, and there can be an element of fatigue if you're doing the same thing over and over again. So to stimulate the likes of Alice Harvey, Nat Panagari, Hannah Joseph, Ella Clark, who've obviously been there right throughout this kind of sustained period, and to supplement it with new players, but not just any new players, right? Really, really good international players. I think, that to me makes them one of the more enticing prospects to watch this year, because I think the change is fascinating. And I think they could go to another level if everybody hits. I'd not put too much stall into the Super Cup, but if you look again down that sort of 10, it's probably the strongest. Like we mentioned, that Mavs on paper look pretty strong. Pulse look strong as well, but I would say as a 10, there's literally no weak links in that Lightning 10.
It's very, very experienced.
Yeah, that's their strength there.
It's very tested. And I think actually we didn't really talk about Barry Neal's departure from
Yeah,
London Pulse, but
that's true, actually. Yeah.
that for me is, you know, the 21-year-old kind of making a brave move, I think, to step in and at a time where Lightning is going through a big change in their attack end, to sort of raise a hand up and go, yep, I want to be involved in that, I think is really interesting. And it'd be I think Barry needs to have a good season for her England prospects, because there's an abundance of riches, I think, in the England front end. So if I think she'll be looking to make a statement there.
On we roll, Manchester Thunder. We won't go too much on Thunder because we've obviously had Karen on and we've been able to speak to her about the squad, which we don't need to go into too much detail on. But like obviously, Nicola Smith injured, Nat Metcalf pregnant, Lois Pearson injured, Paige Reed now injured as well. Obviously, India Massa has come in. You're going to correct me on this, but Anya Retief, have I got that right? Anay Retief, and Anya Williams and Lucy Herdman. Those are the 4 players who have come in alongside Josie Huckle, who's back, McCormick, McKevitt, Carter, Rayner, and Elmaray. So that's the 10. My strength for them, and I'm going to use this as an unashamedly huge Amy Carter fan to champion Amy Carter. Why she's not been England's starting centre for the last 2 years is completely beyond me. And I know there's been some injury issues there, but she is outstanding whenever she's called upon. She had obviously a great relationship with Laura Malcolm. I think she's got a fantastic relationship with Taylor McKevitt. Certainly looks like those two as a wing defence and centre are going to thrive again this year. That's my reason to cheer, and I think a good year for Amy Carter again, and surely like she's the starter in that centre bit for England. I just think it has to happen. It goes without saying that a reason to be concerned is just that pressure that might come on players who are maybe asked to do just a little bit more than they were originally going to be asked to. Like I think we saw at Super Cup Anya Williams step up, and we saw McCormick step up, and we saw Rayner step up. But again, as we've said, games are now going to be an hour long. It's a longer season. There's going to be that little bit more demand going up against experienced defensive ends or experienced mid-courts. And how can those players react to that? I mean, if we know Thunder, we know they'll be fine and they'll rise to the challenge. But the step up in kind of quality, and Karen has admitted herself, the drop off in what she is losing is obviously really, really significant. That you just can't get away from that as the major issue they'll face.
Yeah, I think 40% of your original 10, of which like all of them were international.
Yes. Yeah.
Is huge. And it is going to be a great test of Karen Greig as a coach and the Thunder culture. You know, it was really great to see the reaction, the way the team reacted on Super Cup Sunday, to just not somehow I keep calling it Super Cup Sunday, Super Cup Saturday. I don't know why. I think I've said that. Sorry if I said that before. Super Cup Saturday. Yeah, it's going to be, for me, like whether the players come back, we don't really know the ins and outs of their timelines, but if they can come back, how they come back, and can Thunder hold on while they wait for them to come back, and try and maybe, if it does look like a loss, snatch a 1 point. I think that's going to be really important in the title race. But Lord knows Karen Greig is up for the challenge.
Yes. Last two, Forest first, and then I'll take us home with Leeds.
Nottingham Forest, another newcomer. I seem to have ended up with them all. Look, they're bringing
both of them.
Wow, am I being dramatic? Sure, not me. Look, the might of a Premier League football club and all its professional trimmings, that comes with Nottingham Forest, which I think is really exciting for the league. Head coach is Chelsea Pittman, which raised some eyebrows given her lack of coaching experience, but where she lacks perhaps in that department, she makes up for it in buckets with player experience. Having
similar to Joe, would you say similar to Joe Tripp in that regard? Like, that was the immediate thought I had when
I think Joe did more, did do Charnwood Club and sort of things like that. And was at Lightning. Do you remember when she stopped playing? She did defensive coach at Loughborough Lightning.
Yeah, that is true.
A little bit more than I think. A little bit more than Pittman, but look, I think that we heard from Rolene talking about how Chelsea, just having been a player, is one of the things that she likes most about her as a coach, because she's so close to those feelings, because they really weren't that far off for her. So that is a really cool little fact about her as a coach. But yeah, she's a known winner as a player as well, with having played for so many teams. I think that's really cool. Her squad is Rhea Dixon, Bree Grierson, Freya Hanschel, Iona Christian, Hannah Leighton, Neve Cooper, Jada Pekova, Tash Pavlin, and Frida Kodondi. The one thing I really like about this team is, again, the international flavour, but it's international flavour with existing connections, which I think is going to help, and probably has helped, Pittman stitch this side together. Rolene Stroika, who was in SSN, has come back, I think is a coup for Forest. We saw at the Super Shot how hot her hand can be. My concern for them is that now we know, and everybody knows, that she is such a threat, what plan B is going to look like for Forest. I imagine they're already studying it right now. And I want to keep an eye on that defence end as well. I know Pavlin and Pekova have a pre-existing partnership, I think, from Team Bath, but there's a lot of tall timber in this league, and how they adapt to the Super Shop and its demands. They're actually quite a young end, with Kodondi in that mix as well, is something I'm going to keep an eye out for, I think.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Forest. I'm really looking forward to seeing them this weekend. I thought it played very well at the weekend. I'm a big fan of Chelsea Pittman. I interviewed her when I was working for Sky on 2 or 3 occasions, and I never failed to be impressed. And I think that's always a good sign if you're going to sort of command the team, that you're able to kind of get hold of the room, for want of a better description, sometimes and she was always able to do that. So I don't doubt that the players are going to buy into whatever Chelsea's selling. So I think that's going to be super interesting. I think with Pekova and Pavlin, there's real talent there, and I think, again, we mentioned it a little bit when it came to sort of Jazz Brown, but I do think both Pekova and Pavlin are maybe just on the fringes, like a little bit further back as far as England are concerned. But a strong season, a good season of development. I'd be really keen to see how they grow. I think Leighton, Cooper, and Christian are a real good example of like underrated, sort of proven Super League players who obviously have played their own levels of international netball, but I think will just give an element of experience in front of sort of Pekova, Pavlin, and if we include Kodondi in that, because obviously she's coming over to the Super League. And then again, it will be really interesting to see how sort of Plan B shapes up, because we know what Plan A is, and it's the potential for someone to really set the league on fire in Rolene. I do get that impression from her. So, yeah, I think they're super exciting, and obviously we kind of need. And I think I said this to you via text over the weekend. I was really pleased to see like Rhinos get to the final, Birmingham to show up well. They were in all the games they played, and Forest to get to the semis. I think what we do want from 2.0 is our new teams to emerge as real forces, like competitive. Well, that doesn't mean they need to come in and win straight away, but we want them to be competitive because we want this league to be competitive. And I think looking at Forest, they look like they will be.
Yeah, and actually I did put to Rhea Dixon what Plan B was going to look like, even on the Super Cup Saturday. And this is what she said. You were singing Rolene's praises earlier. I think she may have a few fans now after today. But by the end of that match against Leeds, they were very much like already pinning her, taking her out as much as possible.
Yeah.
Are you expecting some more of that? And what does that mean for your role as goal attack when that's happening to her?
I guess in that Super Shot time, firstly I wasn't expecting that. We've not played a game or a team who's done that, so I think that threw me off a little bit. But to expect it now going forward is something that we can work on in training. But also, like, when people let me shoot, like, I'm happy to shoot. So if they want to keep doing that, then like go for it.
And it's certainly true that Dixon, I think, if you cast your mind back, Paul, to the Super League final was immense when the
Lights
pressure
out.
was on.
Yeah.
She shot the lights out. So she is capable of it. I think it will be about coaxing it out of her week in, week out, and that connection with Brie that they're building with Jamaica. I think that's another nice little side thing that's going on that I think Forest will benefit from.
That's
Right,
good.
last one.
Bring us home. Leeds. I really like. I really like what Leeds have done. I think, and I described this to you yesterday when we were kind of having.
And it's certainly true that Dixon, I think, if you cast your mind back, Paul, to the Super League final was immense when the
Lights
pressure
out.
was on.
Yeah.
She shot the lights out. So she is capable of it. I think it will be about coaxing it out of her week in, week out, and that connection with Brie that they're building with Jamaica. I think that's another nice little side thing that's going on that I think Forest will benefit from.
That's
Right,
good.
last one.
Bring us home. Leeds. I really like. I really like what Leeds have done. I think, and I described this to you yesterday when we were kind of having our production meeting. Ding. Yeah. See, all this. This is all coming together properly. I think Jiva Mensah and Joyce Mvula, that's my reason to cheer. You've got two absolute titans, like at either end of the court, who give you so much experience. And that doesn't just mean in their ability, but in their sort of leadership. And I think Lauren Palmer, in your interview with her, your interview with, was it Lauren, who said that Jiva had kind of given her a bit of carte blanche to sort of say, go ahead and do it, even though you're older than me, kind of thing. It's like, I think empowering kind of a young, talented coach to kind of go out and be herself was kind of really refreshing for Leeds at the weekend. So I think having those two kind of real statement players at either end is a reason to cheer. But supplementing that is I was really, really impressed by Cassie Howard and Harriet Jones last year. So I'm really keen to see how those two kick on. Sort of playing, if you consider Cassie Howard maybe at wing defence, sort of working with Jiva, and Harriet Jones working quite closely with Joyce and Vula. I think that's super exciting for those guys. I think maybe a reason to fear is there, again, for Leeds, just seems to be quite a lot of change. You know, like, I don't think we've had the same coach for back-to-back seasons. There's been sort of franchise director changes. Again, like the playing staff there's been quite a lot of churn over the last 2 or 3 years. And if we consider where Lauren Palmer comes from, which is obviously Thunder, then I think key for her is to create something sustainable. And for that, I think get to the final of the Super Cup was brilliant for Leeds, because there's sort of almost there's like something very subtle to build on to start with. And whilst, you know, I'm not convinced that they're going to challenge right at the very top, I think getting a group that can stay together and then grow would be a huge win for Rhinos this year, because I feel like the changes have just been relentless over the last 2 or 3 years. And my hope for them, and I'm a sneaky Leeds fan because I lived and went to university in Leeds, my hope for them would be just everything to calm down a little bit and to just be allowed to grow. Because I think if you look at the talent in the squad and talent now on the coaching bench, I think there's reasons to be really excited.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to hear from Lauren talking about, like, really, I think for me, the bit that I was really impressed by, she lent into the fact that it has been a revolving door, and she just sort of said, yeah, it's been like that, and that it means that the players have formed their own culture before I arrived. Like, they were already looking out for each other, so I just sort of stepped into it. And she's only been in the job 5 weeks, or at least on Saturday it had been 5 weeks. So look, it looks like a good unit. I think you're right, though. I think how it goes as the season rolls will be interesting to watch, definitely. But I think strong Leeds Rhinos the league is better for it, for sure.
Okay, 8 teams done. Do we want to stick our neck out with some predictions?
Do I want to do that? I don't know.
Do
You want to do that, Paul? What do you think?
Do we want to alienate half the league within 2 episodes of arriving on the podcast scene?
Having just also sort of, well, I said certainly, like, you were a bit tamer than me, but I just said, like, write the Super Cup off. You can't really learn that much from it as well.
I don't think you said that.
No, maybe there was a bit more nuance, but I think it's, yeah, I think these extra rules does make this prediction game a little bit harder, doesn't it, really, if we're being completely honest?
I think so. And I think it's obviously quite difficult because there's quite a lot. There's a lot of new teams. I think we both would be surprised if sort of the usual suspects aren't in and around that top 4. But what is interesting this year is obviously in and around that top 4 could be 5th, 6th, and 7th, and you going into the final weeks of the season still in with a realistic chance of making the top 4. I think that would be my hope and my prediction. I'm going to stop short of sticking my neck out at the moment.
I think also I would want to say at this point, you've talked about the positives of the 10. I think the 10 is going to be something we're going to be talking about a lot because
that's really fair. And what
injury is going to be
before
big.
we go any further on that, all I'll say is that, like, speaking to a couple of players from a couple of different teams, it was more the fact they were able to just build the connection. I think the actual reality of 10 players playing 1 game a week and training a few times a week, I do think that might be something that's exposed. And again, there's a balance, right? Because we're growing. Do we think we need 11 players, 12 players, 15 players? Do we need next gen looks like it's going to be super exciting, but do we need maybe something that's a little bit more, established players that can supplement the squad? I think that is going to be a work in progress. We haven't really discussed next gen, and in itself, I'm going to try and watch the next gen game before Pulse Forest at the weekend, because I do think that's an interesting concept, and it'll be interesting to get some thoughts.
Also, one final question that we had, Paul, actually sort of 2 that were quite linked and I think actually fit in really well here, is a question of imports and the 10. And how do you feel about unlimited imports like SSN? Where do you sit on that?
How have you dropped this on me? You know my feelings on this. I have
with a wider group.
I have a big picture idea that I feel for netball to grow, and I'm talking about netball on a global scale, not just on a domestic level. And I unfortunately, I think the 2 things are quite different. I think netball would benefit from allowing its best players to play in maybe a couple of leagues a year. And that could be, let's hypothetically say, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And then a little bit like cricket's franchise model, allowing your really elite players to kind of make a significant living in the first instance and be professional. But I think for me, that would put out an extremely polished product that is interesting and competitive and can be watched year round. I am well aware that does nothing for the development of national teams and kind of youth and all the rest that goes with that. I feel like that might be at some point where netball might need to think about what it's doing. But that is a huge big picture takeaway on that front. Broadly, I think 2 or 3 in any sport, 2 or 3 imports is sufficient for a successful domestic product.
I'm going to disagree. I say let them loose. Let's have all the imports.
Yeah.
Maximum chaos.
So you agree with my top line? You agree with my top line kind of theory?
Yeah. No. Well, we'd have to completely reimagine the whole netball calendar, wouldn't we?
100%. It's not easy, and it's probably not possible, to be perfectly honest. But I feel like if we consider the problems that Suncor has had, that maybe ANZ has had, South Africa to a degree, but they're still growing, and certainly how many iterations of kind of this is our chance of netball in the UK. my feeling is that maybe at some point a unified domestic calendar, worldwide calendar, might actually help the sport in terms of its visibility, as well
Yeah.
as you being on the inside at the Olympics. Because why haven't you sorted this out yet, Chloe?
I'm working on it. I'm working hard. No, I don't have that power. I'm not that powerful. No, I think
You think unlimited, right?
yeah, like I think that kind of your imagination, that kind of imagination, I think is would be really great to have in netball for sure, and to just like, why do we have this? Why do we have to do things that way? I think is a really good thing, and I think something netball needs to embrace. But for the meantime, I reckon relax the import rule. Let's go toe to toe with SSN. If we're going to copy and paste most of it, let's go all the way. We could be having, because I think we've seen with South Africa, right, this unbelievable talent in Sanori Fisser that just sort of came out of nowhere, challenged Jamaica, challenged England. She would have a perfect home here, and could we have her with Nicola Smith? I don't know, like that, and have what Thunderbirds in Australia have with Shamira Sterling and Tanya Wilson. That's the kind of blockbuster stuff that I think makes a difference, and I am also of that camp where the best English players will do better with going up against the best competition. I think it puts the onus on pathway development, international and national coaches, to really work hard at it and not just rely on a league to sort of do that legwork. And then we had a sort of side question that's kind of related about visas and about Commonwealth Games opening up the number of countries that we could let into the league. I did do a little bit of research on it. I think it is literally the Home Office that sort of, maybe, I don't know, either in consultation with England Netball or whatever, but like we can't have, there is a professional athlete visa, like how professional you need to be. It does need to be a certain amount of the top certain countries. So I don't think it's as simple as like, why can't we just take a really, really exciting player from a country outside the top 12? I think that is literally just a Home Office visa rule that cannot be overcome. But yes, anyway, that was just, I chucked that at you and you received that very well.
That's an entire episode, right? I think that's an entire episode.
Why not? We have a Commonwealth Games around the corner.
A large number of weeks to fill in the off season.
Great. Well, Paul, I think we might be done.
So that's episode 2, pretty much in the can. Probably a bit longer than we'll usually do, but obviously a lot to kind of cram in. We'll be back next week with a look back at round 1 and proper netball, to use your phrase, Chloe. Proper netball coming up this weekend.
With data.
With data.
Yeah.
Someone get Chloe some data.
Please give me stats, I beg. No, I'm excited. I'm really, and it's all broadcast. We haven't really even talked about that, and that's cool.
We haven't really spoken about it, and at some point again, we'll kind of get into the broadcast. But for now, as always, thanks for listening. If you've made it this far, well done. And we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Goodbye.